Yo, welcome to Golden Spaces, an Odyssey original podcast. It's Justin here. I know you guys are used to hearing Nat's voice introduce the show, but I will be taking over the introduction for today. I'm here joined by my man Charlie Cummings, writer for Switch Theory, host of the Game
Yes,
Six
sir.
Play Pod. How you feeling today, Charlie?
Doing good, doing good. Just got out of a few days up in the Sierras, enjoying some mountain time, catching some summer league. It's a fun time, man. You know, you gotta dose yourself with just the right amount of NBA right now, or else you go crazy. Because you scroll too much and you're like, wait, there's a conspiracy to make Wemby good. What's going on here?
Right, right. I'm struggling with dosing myself right now. I think I gotta wean
hmm
myself off of the Twitter scrolling for a little bit because it's a lot of the takes on the timeline are just kind of driving me nuts right now. But good to have you on, man. Let's talk about summer league. Let's start with summer league at least. We got a lot to cover today, but we'll get into summer league right now because it's the hot thing that's going on right now. A lot of people are in Vegas. We just saw yesterday a lot of press conferences were happening in that area with Jordan and Chris Paul, and we saw Steph courtside and stuff like that. Um, let's get into what we've seen from the Dubs so far, the baby Dubs. Pajimski's played in what, three summer league games so far.
hmm
Like what I'm seeing from him so far as far as just being able to stuff the stat sheet, he's been doing that a lot, rebounding, passing. The shot is coming along, but I do think he has an incredibly high feel. So that was, as advertised, he's delivered on that so far, being able to make quick reads and process the game fast. But I do think some of the pre-draft or draft, descriptions of his game are true in the aspect of athleticism as well, and not necessarily being the best NBA athlete out there. But I think he makes up for some of it with his IQ. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the stats sheet stuffing. One thing that's kind of stood out to me, he's had a couple rough shooting games in a row. I think it was 3 of 16 last night. Not ideal, but still almost pulled off a triple double. Like the guy was making a lot of really nice reads. He was keeping the ball moving really well. One of the big things that jumped out for him on the scouting report was just his nose for rebounding the basketball. So I think that's a really positive thing for this Warriors team, and not taking shots at any players in particular, but they had too many guys where it's like if they're not scoring the ball, then they're really not bringing that much to the table on a given night. And I think it kind of is more of a comfort knowing that if Pods has a rotation spot, if he's not doing a whole lot in terms of scoring the ball, then he can still help fill in gaps elsewhere and at least be a solid contributor on a given night.
For sure, for sure. I think that's been a staple for all of the Golden State teams that were championship level over the years. Just having a lot of guys, and people like to make fun of it, to say like there's a lot of hot potato guys like who just like to pass and move the ball. But that type of stuff is valuable, especially when you're on a team with guys like Steph and Clay who have no issue at all shooting the ball from all type of angles and keeping the play going after the first or second action has been covered. Um, a hot topic on Warriors Twitter right now, or just in the Warriors space, is Lester Quinones. He's been having a really good summer league. He's been a good player, like for them in their G League team, and people have had their eye on him for a while. But he's kind of stepping into his own, adding to his game. What have you seen from him so far?
Yeah, well, shout out to the people who were first on it, like our guys who run the GSW Reddit page. Like they are super on top of all everything what's going on with the G League.
Hmm.
And I remember last year when we were talking about it, I was like, "Hey, I'm checking in this game. Like Travion Williams looks good," and he's just like, "Man, you don't even know. Like, if you think he is going to be like a player, then you haven't been paying attention to Lester." And I was like, "All right, like tell me about it. Like, I want to hear it." And he's like, "Man, the guy just scores, plain and simple. Like he's got a really nice shot. He's confident with it. He can get to a pretty tidy little step back. The thing that really stands out to me is he loves to drive. He's got a really good frame, and he doesn't get knocked off balance, which is something I always look for. Like you're finishing, but it's kind of wild all over the place. That doesn't feel that sustainable to me. But when you're going in, you're meeting the help at the rim, and you're barely getting knocked off your spot, and you're still scoring the ball. Like that's a guy to watch out for. And we know that this Warriors team, they're going to take rim pressure any way they can get it, even if that's just a guy who can attack closeouts and get a couple feet in the paint, draw some contact. Then that would be really welcome. So yeah, man, I don't know, like Lester. I before like we went into summer league, I was in the camp of like, hey, you can't have so many unknown quantities on this roster in
Mm-hmm.
terms of adding Lester to one of those rotation spots, but he's making a case that he might be more of a known quantity than we gave him credit for.
For sure. For sure. I mean, like you said, he's pretty stout. Like he's very physical, on both ends. I think, as a defender, he's coming along. I wouldn't necessarily say he's a stopper, but he's taken the challenge of guarding the other teams in the summer league, guarding the other teams like best guy sometimes, and just really trying to make himself known on both ends. And he's really like making a good case that he could potentially fill a roster spot at some point late in the season, maybe. I think everyone's hoping that they can just secure him on a two-way and no one tries to grab him before or extend an offer to him before then. So they can kind of keep him around while also still having opportunities to fill in the roster spots with bigger players, maybe. But our guy Guy Santos is he's doing all right as well. Like he's way bigger than he was, noticeably bigger. Hair's longer than last year. He looks like a Pokemon evolution of himself from the previous summer league, and he's he's playing well too. I like Guy Santos though. How do you feel about Guy? I think he's a big body that they can potentially use later on as he develops.
Yeah, so I think his game will be really interesting. The slashing stands out first. Like the guy just loves to drive the ball, which I think really it's really something that they need. But he's got a motor. Like the guy just does not stop. Whenever I've watched him in the G League, he's everywhere trying to get rebounds. He's constantly cutting, trying to relocate, just make himself available. So I think he's showed a lot of the traits that this coaching staff is really going to like. Like don't put your head down, don't get comfortable, just constantly stay moving, make all of the little plays on the fringes, and then develop your more important skills. And he's coming along with the shot. He's getting a little more coordinated with his drives. He's starting to be able to finish with his left. And he does remind me a lot of ways, like Kuminga. Like Kuminga, fresh like his first year in the league, he was driving all the time, and half the time he would just dribble it off his leg. Like he'd just kind
Mm-hmm.
of end up out of bounds. Like defender doesn't even need to get a poke on it. He's just kind of losing the handle. And then year two, suddenly he's driving, he's holding onto the ball all the way, and then now good things are happening, and defenders
Yep.
are becoming terrified of that. And I think Guy's showing a little bit of that too. He's got such a powerful frame that once he starts to really put that handle together, then he looks like he could be a steal for them. Because if you get a rotation player out of the second round, plain and simple, like that's a steal.
For sure.
Most of those guys don't end up getting real shots in the league. So if you get a guy who's young and can contribute, even if not this year, next year, then that's a real score for them.
For sure. For sure. And I think even though Guy um, was an acquisition from when Bob was still GM, I think overall the team, the franchise, it seemed like it's shifting a little bit more into high feel, high IQ guys who know how to play within the Warriors system, consistently move, just make the right play instead of just going for the home run super athlete that's out there, which is I think is a good thing, for one, just setting them up for after their title window is still open and still having guys that fit just that Warriors ethos and that Warriors identity going forward, while also potentially being able to contribute now while they're still in their title window. Um, we haven't had a chance to see TJD yet, Trace, but he projects even as a guy who, has a high IQ, good defensive feel, knows how to go for weak side blocks and, just a guy who can pass and do a lot of good things for them out there. Do you see a path for him, cracking the regular season rotation or just the rotation in general?
So I think the tough thing will be like he's a no question immediate offensive fit. Would it be nice if he could shoot a little bit? Yes. That jumper in practice is, it's looking a little slow, a little iffy. Maybe he's a
Mhm.
guy who can like make him pay every once in a while if the defense is disrespecting him, but it doesn't look like he's going to be shooting the ball anytime soon. And but man, like you said, the passing skills are there. He's got a whole lot of athleticism. He's got a good frame at 6'9". Like that's kind of the funny thing is even though he's technically an undersized center, he's oversized by Warrior standards. So
Right.
uh like yeah, no, I mean he's Draymond's what, like 6'7" on a good day.
On a good
Uh
day. Yeah.
yeah. On a real good day.
Right.
And yeah, like we know Looney he's got good height, but like he doesn't play that much bigger than his height. Like he's mostly about like getting
Rounded.
into the right positions, like staying centered. Yeah, so
Mhm.
having a guy like Trace who, even if he's not like an ace primary rim protector guy, like he's going to be aggressive. He's going to put himself in the right positions, and I think the defensive game is going to be interesting to me because he he really did do well at that in college, but it's a much more conducive environment to what he can do. I think
Mhm.
what's going to be interesting is can he still balance his risk taking? The thing that jumped off to me the most watching the film on him was he's really good at contesting shots and getting blocks, and he does it without sacrificing rebounding position. I think that was one of the things that really drove me crazy when you were watching James Wiseman. Is he's always the biggest dude in the paint, and he would sell out for a block that he probably didn't
Yep.
even have a 50-50 chance of getting. And now
Mhm.
it's like, hey, that's great, you contested the shot, but there's their big man is sitting in the paint now, being guarded, like trying to get boxed out by like Moses Moody, and that's
Right.
not going to work. So I think Trace he brings a sense of responsibility on the defensive floor. He knows what he is and he knows what he isn't. So that's kind of the question to me is, does Kerr see enough of that like trust in him to stay within himself defensively, like not make more mistakes than he needs to because he's going to be a drop guy. Like he's not going to be the most impactful, versatile big defender, but he can rebound really well. He can rotate, and if he's not making mistakes, then maybe he does get some burn.
Nice. Nice. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have one, Draymond Green, two, Kevon Looney there, teaching the ropes. And then obviously on the offensive end, Steph and CP3 and guys who can potentially run handoff situations with him or pick and roll. Even Corey Joseph, who's been in the league for a super long time. So I think, you know, going back to what we're talking about having guys that just shifting the team to more of a high IQ experienced team can even help the young guys develop a little bit faster. And I think that's the hope from the front office this year, especially when it comes to Kaminga and Moody and guys that are, in position now, year three, to take those leaps and become legitimate rotational players. But while we're still on
Mm-hmm.
the topic of summer league, let's get into like the top picks, right? Like who stood out to you so far? I mean, Wemby had one subpar game where everybody just jumped off the boat and said he was a bust, and then he had a great game the next game, and everybody's like, "Oh, actually, he is pretty damn good." Brandon Miller's been kind of up and down to some people. He's not shooting the best. He's been in a lot of foul trouble and stuff like that. And Scoot got hurt his first game. So, what are your takeaways from like the big names out there? And is there anybody that you're like, I didn't think he was going to be that good? Like I don't know, Keontae George, 30 something points the other day. What are you looking at?
Ooh, Keontae was a guy I was really interested in. I thought he would have made a great fit for the Warriors, if they were looking to kind of replace some outside shooting, some combo guard skill. He's a real. I don't want to say he's like an aggressive defender, but he's really he's really assertive. Like he doesn't give ground. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't foul that much, which I really appreciate. And the passing reads really jumped out. The guy. The guy can make a whole variety of passes. Like he's making bounces all over the place. Um, one other thing I saw too that I really like, and this is just kind of one of those like little personality things that I just love. Someone, I think they took a picture of it, like Keontae's screensaver on his phone was like a scouting report with all the weaknesses, and I was like, oh yeah, like that
Wow.
guy, that guy's going places. Like if he's
Yeah,
that dedicated,
he got it. He's
yeah. Oh,
bouncy. He's a
he's
crazy
got it.
athlete too. I didn't know he was that athletic. I don't know.
Oh yeah, getting up there for lobs and stuff. Like
Oh yeah.
he's a real versatile guy. Someone else too. I know the Warriors were going pretty hard after him. Anthony Black is looking very ready. Like
Mm,
he's got a real sound feel for the game. Every time I watch him, he's just like he's putting guys on his hip in like 3 dribbles or less, like almost every time he drove the ball. And that's
interesting.
just such a skill I appreciate, especially for a guy who's, kind of a non-shooter right now. He's just like, hey, if you're going to even get close to me on the perimeter, I'm going to put you behind me immediately. I'm going
Mm,
to open up the floor for playmaking. And then he's got a real solid floater and finishing game to complement it. So he he looks like he's going to be a good one. Um, that's the thing that stinks right now, man, is we got like Wemby getting shut down after 2 games, Scoot getting hurt, Amen getting hurt immediately.
true.
Uh, that was tough because he looked incredible that first game, then sprains his ankle the second half, and now we're not going to see him for another couple months. Um, but yeah, man, it's been crazy. I think the Brandon Miller thing, it's kind of getting beat to death, but the one thing the one thing that kind of annoys me is like people want to use college to say like, oh look, he did this in the NCAA, so he's going to be great, and then they want to throw out summer league because of like sample size, whatever, that kind of thing. Like you can get a good like 8-9 games in summer league where we're watching you against NBA athletes for the first time, and that's when things start to really stand out. So like, yeah, I'm gonna look at 7, 8, 9 games against NBA athletes compared to 30 games against mostly not NBA athletes,
Yeah.
and this was a guy who had athletic concerns. Like he doesn't get to the rim or finish at the rim in half court. He's got some kind of side to side limitations. We saw, like he had one real nice dunk, but he's not the most like vertically explosive guy, like go up and get it over your head kind of guy. Um, and he looks slower than a lot of people,
Mm,
and it's a bit concerning, because that's you kind of hope like if you're looking at a guy like Amen, where you're like, all right, he's got some flaws, but like these aren't inherent flaws he has. Like he can do literally everything you need
right.
athletically. And that's kind of the thing I look out for in summer leagues. It's like, uh-oh, if this guy looks a step slower than everyone, or if he doesn't look as strong as everyone else, like that's the thing that can set you back quicker than, not having a 3-point shot, not having a good feel for the floor right now, because those are things that can be developed.
For sure. For sure. I think the Thompson twins, I mean, those dudes are so freakish like athletically. It's ridiculous. And you can just see
Crazy.
it. They're probably going to have an immediate impact in the league just off of that defensively, just being able to be all over the court. So I'm really excited to see the Rockets young guys, and it's funny how like as Warriors fans over the years we just kind of like we're such in a rivalry with Rockets fans and even Thunder fans. But now it's like I'm kind of excited to see those teams develop and turn into something. Because the Thunder, man, like Chet is looking pretty good, and he's kind of like a sleeper. I wouldn't say he's a sleeper for a rookie of the year, but he's technically going to be a rookie. I don't know if he'll have the touches offensively to put up the numbers to be in the consideration for rookie of the year, but impact wise, he might step in and be like the most impactful towards winning out the gate. He's
Hmm.
just seems like much more strong, and obviously his defensive instincts have always been there. But just another year older and wiser, he just seems like he's ready to step in and play a big part defensively out the gate.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. I had the same thought. Like I had a friend text me. asking about like Chet Rookie of the Year. He's like, is that's something I should be throwing a little money on? And I was like, man, considering this class, and like you said, the offensive load that he's probably not going to get. I mean, he's not a put the ball on the deck, get you 20 a night kind of guy.
Right.
I'm like that guy's gonna have to block like 3 shots a game out of the gate just to get in the conversation. Because I mean, man, like there's a little doubt about the Damian Lillard situation right now, but if he gets his way, Scoot's gonna get all the touches he can handle.
Yep.
Brandon Miller's gonna be putting up numbers for better or worse, and then of course there's that Wemby guy. There's basically nothing standing in his way of like touching the ball every single possession.
Right.
So, and then you consider that he's just 7'5" floating around in the paint. Uh, I saw multiple instances where he was kind of in like a not really quite like a hedge, but kind of playing like intermediate drop on pick and roll, and guys thought they could just pull up, and he just went, mm-mm. Like nope, like people are just not used to that.
Right.
They're not used
There's
to
no way to
7'5".
there's no way to get used to that. Right. Like
No.
he's legitimately contesting and blocking shots, standing at like the free throw line, blocking 3-pointers. And it's like the defensive potential, you can just see his ceiling is crazy. The amount of ground he can just cover with his length, his height. I mean, I'm pretty sure he can dunk without jumping. Like maybe on his tippy toes, he can dunk. So he's like right there at the rim at all
Yeah.
times. He's going to be scary on that end. I think offensively, I think his game is predicated on how good of a shooter he can ultimately be, like how much touch he has, because it's going to be tough for him to really consistently beat guys off the dribble just because of his height and guys can get under his handle. But if he can consistently just shoot over guys and he has the touch for whereas like even if you contest, it doesn't really matter, then he can be a really devastating offensive player. But I think out the gate, his defense is going to be game changing for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is people talk about like, especially with a guy like Kevin Durant. Like how has KD had like almost no drop off in his scoring, despite the fact that he can't really like get to the rim like he used to. It's
Yeah,
because when you're 7 foot and you have touch like that, then it's just if you get to your spots and you're comfortable, it's over.
it's a cone
And
drill.
that's where when yeah, exactly, yeah, he's just like coach is standing there with the pad,
Right.
like is
Exactly.
is is nothing to him. And he's got 5 extra inches on KD. Like you just kind of saw it. If that's the frustrating thing too. If you're a defender and you're like kind of staying in front of him, you're kind of walling off his drive. He can just pick up his dribble, like hit from all
Yeah,
kinds of awkward angles. Like he doesn't need his feet to be properly set. It's wild stuff, man.
for sure. Hopefully he
uh,
can, stay healthy and all that stuff so we can really see his true potential be realized. Um, but let's move on from summer league. Let's go into free agency, right? We see the title here is Dunleavy's first off season. Obviously the free agent acquisitions, Corey Joseph and Dario Saric are the two guys that weren't on the team before. Then they obviously retained Draymond Green on his deal that I like the look of, to be honest. 22 in the first year, I want to say, then 24 and 25, and then there's a 27 player option. I think at that point of the player option, you can realistically expect that their title window might be closed by that point. So it's kind of irrelevant to me.
mhm.
But I like the first part of that deal. But how we feeling about these acquisitions? Like we needed to replace a third ball handler. Ty Jerome was expected to be used in that spot, or at least thought about, and he signed elsewhere, I think in Cleveland for a multi-year deal. So they replaced him with
Mhm.
Corey Joseph, who I think is a similar caliber player, if not even a little bit better. And then the big name that everyone wanted from the beginning of free agency, Dario Saric. Just a bigger
Super
body,
Dario,
somebody
baby.
super Dario. Like finally got him. We got teased early on in free agency, like yes, we got him out the gate, and then it was like, hold up, he might go somewhere else. But they finally got him. Guy 6'10" who can shoot it, high feel for the game. can put it on the ground a little bit, can do a lot of things that particularly fit well with the Warriors. How we feeling about these moves?
Yeah, I wish I could remember who put it out there first, but I saw it just scrolling around. Someone called this before free agency, and I got to dig it up so I can give them proper credit later. They pointed out like the last 5 years when the Warriors have made their free agent signings, that basically all of them come like 3 to 5 days after the free agency period actually starts. So so they were just like, don't freak out. And then what did we do? We all freaked out.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
it just everybody was just like, "Oh my God, we're not getting Dario. Like it's over. Trade Steph. Fire Dunleavy."
I mean, the Suns signed like 10 guys the first day, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, they're getting everybody." Like, and I'm like, half of these guys, the Warriors don't even want half of these guys. First of all, like they shouldn't want
Hmm.
half of these guys. Um, everyone wanted Yuta Watanabe. I think he would have fit very well just because he has, his shooting ability, his defensive potential. He's tall, plays very hard, egoless type of guy. But other than that, I think everybody else that went to those teams was kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool. Um, but Warriors Twitter is definitely hitting that panic button a lot, and that's just it is what it is. I think most fan bases are the same way. They just want their team to do well and stuff like that. But in what ways do you see Dario specifically, helping this team in comparison to like what we were missing last year? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost is the spacing. He's not hesitant to shoot it. He's really good at shifting himself between the wings and the corners, like looking for those opportunities. He's not just going to be like stationary in one spot, just waiting for the ball to swing. He's going to be active. He's going to look to make cuts. He's going to look to, do little V cuts in and out, try to get himself back open, which I really like. Um, but the other things that really stand out too, and our guy Joe Varai did a really good segment on this. Like he really did well with Chris Paul, pick and roll, pick and pop, especially on the short roll. They had a really good synergy together. Um, Based on some recent quotes, I'm not as sure as I was that Chris Paul is going to be a bench guy, but I I
We're
kind of
getting
have a
close.
hard time, but like even if they start him, I still feel like he gets a lot of minutes where he's just kind of directing the second unit guys.
Mhm.
Like maybe it gives them a chance to like sub off early, and then he gets to come in and kind of run, second quarter, and then those fourth quarter stretches when Steph's off the floor. Uh, but that giving him someone who can shoot the ball, who he has previous experience with, and who he's a veteran is going to be really important. Because now, when you're looking at this unit kind of coming together, you've got CP3, you've got Gary Payton, you've got Dario as kind of your like cohesive vets. You know what you're going to get out of them on a nightly basis.
Yep.
And I think they're guys that really work in well around Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. Like those are I think two of the most prolific cutters on the team, not named Andrew Wiggins. And
Mhm.
I guess Steph Curry too, because he's just the best at everything. But
Pretty much.
um, no, so like if you have, yeah, I think that was the my initial read too on Trace Jackson Davis is he is going to be amazing in the short roll. I'm not sure how much they trust him initially. Well, now they have a guy that Kerr is going to trust that can really make plays in the short roll. Like he has a really good ability of just processing the floor almost instantaneously. If he's in the high post or coming off the short roll, he's going to find cutters. He's going to find other guys open on the perimeter. And
Mhm.
if needed, he can put the ball on the deck a little bit. Like he can get himself into the mid range when he's really feeling his game. So I'm I'm all in on this signing. We know that this is a team that loves to just make incredible rim protection defense out of nothing. And
Right.
they've definitely like turned much worse defensive bigs into productive defensive players. So that I think this is just a home run for a minimum.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think over the last few years. with the absence of having like traditional rim protectors. Obviously, Draymond Green's amazing at pretty much everything defensively, but I think they've shifted their focus to being more of a rim deterrent team, right? Just to prevent rim attempts altogether with rotations and elite point of attack and wing defense and stuff like that. So I do think if they maintain that identity, that they can for sure, like for lack of a better term, hide Dario's rim protection in those units where he might be playing the five. And especially if he's playing in the second unit with Gary and Kuminga, and hopefully Moody takes even another step defensively. I think we saw a lot of good things from him in the playoffs last year when he was switched on to perimeter players. But if he can get even better there, now you have three guys that you can rely upon to stay in front of their man, rotate well, athletic, long guys that can just make sure guys don't even get all the way to the rim in the first place. But offensively, in addition to what you're saying, like him as a pick and roll partner with Chris Paul is particularly intriguing to me, but also as a spacer, if Chris Paul wants to go pick and roll with like Gary or Jonathan. And I think that's going to be huge for Jonathan's development as well, just because if he's in a short roll and he has shooters and cutters around him available to him being able to make those reads, helps him long term, just in general as an individual player, tremendously. Because eventually he's going to be, maybe a pick and roll ball handler himself, but having the ability to be the screener and roller and finding guys and, playing in space, because he's devastating in space as an athlete. So if he has guys pulling people away from the rim and he's rolling towards the rim and Chris Paul is dropping it down to him or throwing a lob, that's just going to be incredibly hard for second units, especially, to stop and lead. So that's what's really got me excited about Dario. And I mean, it's cool you mentioned him and Gary and CP3 specifically, because if you go back to the 2022 season, outside of that traditional starting five, the three main guys were Jordan, Gary, and Otto, and they all specifically added a different dynamic to that starting five, depending on the matchup, where you can just add additional perimeter scoring and ball handling with Jordan. You can add additional athleticism on the perimeter and defense with Gary. And then you can just add additional scoring gravity, play finishing, rebounding with Otto if need be. You could just swap out any of the starting five there. So I think that dynamic is returned to the team. If Dario can be as good as a rebounder and, helps a rotational defender as Otto was, that would be amazing, because I do think at this point he can add a little bit more than Otto can as a passer. So I think offensively it could be a little bit of a better fit or equal fit. And then defensively, if they're just as good as each other, that would be amazing. Let's get into Corey Joseph. All right. Veteran, pop guy. I mean, he played for the Spurs, championship Spurs. It was a beautiful game, Spurs. So he comes from that background of playing on selfless teams, being able to move the ball, defend, rotate, stuff like that. I think it's another great signing for a veteran for a veteran minimum, to be honest.
Yeah, so I think what excited me the most about that, and as much as you can get excited about kind of minimum signing like that, you're getting availability. Like, that this is a guy he used to be kind of more in that he was always like an 82 game guy in the middle of his career, dialed down a little bit more, but he was on those Detroit teams that have been like surprisingly guard heavy and not incentivized to win. So it's not like he's really on their highest priority list.
ton of guards and ton of centers for some reason. Like no wings, just
yeah,
guards.
Whole lot of centers. But so I think Corey brings. Yeah, I get why people were upset about Ty Jerome, but he had pretty stark limitations. Like he wasn't really a point of attack stopper.
Nope.
Not that Corey is, but you're kind of not really making any upgrade or downgrade there. He's definitely a better ball handler. Like Ty had a good assist to turnover because he really took care of the ball, but he wasn't going to like operate off of second side stuff. He was mostly kind of looking to get into his floater or just get to the line.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could definitely argue he's a more well-rounded scorer than Corey, but they need someone not only who's just taking care of the ball, but looking to make proactive reads, like a guy who can actually, run a pick and roll now and then, hit rollers, make skip passes if he needs to. and that wasn't really Ty's game. Um, and the reason I think this is so important is because now you have 35-year-old Steph Curry and 38-year-old Chris Paul. Like you're heavily reliant on both of those guys being in the lineup. And, that's less important when you're kind of managing things through the regular season, but you need something to fall back on when those guys inevitably get hurt or when they just, need rest games, when you got the back-to-backs are stacking up, whatever it is. Like you need a guy who can just kind of elevate their playmaking floor when those guys miss time. So that's why I
Mhm.
think having that third point guard is really important.
For sure. For sure. We know, I mean, Steph usually has missed time over the last few seasons from freak accidents, and that are mostly contact injuries, like falling on his ass or like getting a stinger in his
Mm-hmm.
shoulder randomly. But I mean, you kind of have to pencil something in at this point, right? The last 3 seasons in a row, he's missed some time. Chris Paul has been a little bit more durable in the regular season, but he's 38, right? So inevitably Steve, Celebrini, those guys are going to shut them down for back-to-backs early in the season. And you got to just kind of brace yourself for any type of injury that they may have. And I think Corey definitely is a guy that can just step in and just make sure he's not turning the ball over and messing up and stuff like that. So I think that was a really good signing for sure. But they still got 5 spots left, including the 3 two-way spots. We're assuming Lester's going to get one of those spots. I think we're hoping Gee can get one of those spots, maybe. But what do you think they should prioritize, like whether it be two-way or roster spot, like left on the roster? Because I know a lot of people want another power wing that can shoot. TJ Warren's name's been floating around. Trendon Watford's name's been floating around, even though he's not really like a stretch shooter. But
Mm-hmm.
and some people want another big. What do you think they need specifically?
Yeah, so I think there are definitely some options out there, especially on the wings. Like I mean, I get what people are going for with the Watford thing. I think he's a little bit, less refined than what they'd be looking for. Like the guy's got a lot of talent, and he, summer league MVP last year. Like the guy has shown that he can like go out and get scoring for himself. He's got an NBA ready body, but there's just there's a lot to work through there. If they're interested in doing this, hey, former enemies make nice thing, can Clay and Rodney Magruder make nice if they just need an extra body on the wings?
I don't know if
Does
that's I don't know about that one.
yeah, that was a little bit more
Yeah, that's like you're
a
gonna be
little
my
bit
enemy for
meaner.
life. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
Oh,
I think there's still guys out there like if they
what do you think of
at this
Vaughn?
point in I mean, dude, Juan, like he's tough, but like if they're looking to, have a guy who can kind of like replicate Kuminga's production, especially when they're going through stretches where he can't be like trusted as much in the rotation, I think that he would be a great option because he's going to bring the defense. Like
Mm.
what kind of hustle he brings, like the kind of playmaking he can do. The shot's not going to be there more nights than it is, but you live with it because of what he brings to you from like defense, hustle, leadership perspective. But there's still some guys out there. One that I've thrown out that I really want to see, and I'm interested if he's kind of angling for standard or if he's a two-way, is Romeo Langford. He was one of the toss-ins of the Derek White trade, played the last season and a half, I want to say, in San Antonio. His defense is real. Like that, people last year, we were talking about Stanley Johnson as a buyout guy. Like all the same reasons are there because if you have a hustle guy who is going to bring positive defense on the wing, brings a good frame, and can shoot the ball a little bit, then that's the kind of guy I'm interested in taking a risk on, especially if they're looking for another wing. But yeah, like they got options. maybe get a little revenge on the Suns, like bring in Bismack Biyombo because the guy can run a pick and roll and rebound the ball. It's just good to have bodies at center. So yeah, we'll see, but it feels like they got some good options right there, and they're in a good position depth wise right now. So I think they can afford to be a little picky.
For sure. For sure. I mean, obviously they're not going to fill that 15th spot until later on in the season to just, I think, save some tax money. But like you said, I think they can, you know, kind of narrow it down to what they feel like they specifically need. And I think either another wing or another big would be a good option. And you always have the option to fill that last spot later on in the season. Um, let's move on to what we were talking about earlier, where Mr. Christopher kind of gave us an interesting little nugget earlier, um, when he was asked how he feels about leading the second unit and all that type of stuff. He rebutted with, "Are you coaching?" to our beloved Kendra Andrews, I believe it was, who asked the question. But it kind of left everyone thinking like, is he expecting to start? Uh, so what do you think of that? Because I think everyone is of the understanding that his best role would probably be to come off the bench and they can just maintain the size and the integrity of their starting lineup, who was very good last year. And then he just kind of bolsters their second unit while also being able to stay healthy for the majority of the season, hopefully the entire season, playing lower minutes in a more specific role. Um, but do you think if he does start, that it can work, long term?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think like regular season wise, you can probably kind of get away with it. You can just run the small unit for like 5-6 minutes. Take CPE out. Put Looney back in. Go a little bigger. Do what you got to do. I think the thing that's tough is I don't think Chris is a guy that has much of an ego at this point, as much as you can for being the level of star he's been for the last 20 years. He's willing to accept new challenges. Like we saw what he did with the Thunder, which was amazing. We saw kind of what he brought to the locker room with Phoenix. Yes, that eventually kind of deteriorated, but he was like the integral veteran that led them to getting to that finals against the Bucks, and I think he'll be willing to put the team first. Like that's not really a concern of mine, and I think the Warriors are kind of go to him and say, hey, like you've been doing things mostly your way for the last 20 years, and it hasn't got you where you needed to get. Not only do you know that we can get you where you want to get, but we also had the best starting five by net rating last year in the league. Like we're not about to blow that up over ego. Um, and I think that's what this team does. Like we've so much of the stuff you see on the court, it's fair to criticize Steve Kerr for. But what we don't see is what he does off the court, and that's in managing personalities. Like yes, it gets a little rocky when his players start punching each other, but like he's kept Draymond in the fold now twice through like rumors of him leaving. He's
Mhm.
navigated so many huge personalities in this locker room. I don't doubt that he could convince Chris Paul to put the team first, come off the bench if necessary. Maybe they experiment going small with a little like Steph, CP3, Dre, Wiggins, Clay. So we'll see how it goes. But ultimately, I expect him to be coming off the bench, at least in the regular season, and then maybe if there's a matchup where they're kind of thinking like small out of the gate when it comes to playoff time, uh, then maybe they start to toy with it.
Yeah.
I hope that gives you a little clue what I'm thinking of this team. Like this is a 50-win team we got right here with Chris in the fold.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've been kind of like enjoying the takes about how the Warriors are cooked and they're not going to be good anymore, and Chris Paul's old and washed and everything. And I'm like you just said, they had the best starting lineup in the league last year based on that rating. It wasn't as big of a sample size as some other starting fives, but was a pretty substantial sample size, and they were pretty good the year before that as well when they won a championship. So you start with that, and then you have, a Hall of Famer in Chris Paul, who's still very good. I know people like to say he's washed and stuff like that. Maybe he is in the context of leading a team as the one or two to a championship or to deep in the playoffs. But as your point guard coming off the bench, he's probably the best backup point guard in the league at this point, pretty easily. So that in itself, paired with all the other guys they have, I'm fairly confident they'll cruise to 50 wins. It's more so a question of how many above 50 do they get for me. And yeah, I agree totally. And I think overall, if Chris Paul is just has his points in the game where he's like running the show, I think ultimately he'll be satisfied. Like that'll satisfy the ego, the little ego that he may have, right? Just being like, hey, this is my unit that I'm running. Like, look at how we're winning the minutes when I'm running the show and stuff like that. Like I'm clearly an integral part to this team who's been very, very good. I think that is the best, most ideal path to them just managing that whole thing and not having it, go awry there. So I'm pretty excited. I've been a lifelong pretty much Chris Paul hater. So this is like very, very,
Oh yeah,
very, very
I
different.
got a lot of reckoning to do this season, man. Like it's
and then I put a tweet out maybe like a week or so ago where there's a greater than zero chance that a lot of Warriors fans will start to like Chris Paul by the end of the season, and I don't know if I'm like ready for that at all. So we'll see, but I'm pretty excited about how they're going to work.
See, here's how I got around it mentally. Is I'm like, I've been hating this dude for so long. I've been calling him basketball cop, like the basketball capitalist because of the CBA, like all these different things, man. Like can't win a ring, whatever. So here's my balance. If the Warriors go out and they win a championship with Chris Paul, no one's gonna complain. no one's gonna
For sure.
no one's gonna complain. And then here's where the hater in me thrives. Then we get to say forever that he had to come win a ring with us.
Exactly.
And if we don't win, if it doesn't work out, then he stays ringless. So
he stays ringless, and it's his fault. I don't care if he actually.
It's all his fault. It's all his fault.
It's all his fault. I don't care if he shoots it.
Yeah, he could be doing 2010 every playoff game, and I'm like, nah, it was him. It was bad vibes. Get him out.
Exactly. Bad vibes. Draymond was on Paul George's pod recently, and he had an interesting take about his own offensive game and how, over the years, especially with the years that he played with Kevin Durant, he was kind of taken out of his offensive game, and he's been struggling and still in process to get it back. I feel like while we were in it, a lot of us kind of saw that happening, right? Like when you're playing on a team with Steph and Clay and KD, they should and they will all get 20 shots apiece. And it would be idiotic for them not to. So there's really not a lot of shots to go around outside of them. And it's hard to justify shooting the ball when either of them are even semi-open. So it makes sense. And then over the years, I feel like Draymond has just kind of sustained some random injuries that have, affected his shoulders and stuff like that, which could also have an effect on his shooting touch. Do you feel like he needs to get that back, though, at this point with this team and, considering that they've lost a little bit of offensive firepower with Jordan? And I don't know. What do you think about that?
I don't know if he needs to get back to 2016 hitting step backs, 35 points in game 7. I don't know what was going on there. That's just still crazy to me in hindsight.
Right.
So I think that's the thing that we saw last year. Last year, I think he got way too comfortable at some points, just only facilitating. And, it felt like most of his offense was coming either in transition, when he's just getting completely left open, maybe hits the occasional three or just gets lost in the paint, or the fake dribble handoffs, and he can still execute those to a T. But that's maybe going to get you 2 points a night if you play your
Mhm.
cards right. Um, he just needs he's still so much stronger than a lot of other guys. He really does know how to draw contact. I mean, asking him to not yell at the refs when he doesn't get his calls is just not going to happen because they don't reward guys who just shout regardless of what happens. But he knows how to get himself to the line. He knows how to find ways to get funky finishes, or at least put some pressure on the defense by rolling. Um, I mean, really, what it is to me is just keeping them honest. Because if they're
Mhm.
just going to completely ignore you, and they're like, oh, we're running this handoff, we're not even going to bother guarding against the drive or the post up or whatever it is he's going to do. He just needs to show that he has spots he wants to pick. Just make the defense think twice, because you can't just be handing it off to Clay and Steph just going right into a double team every time. That
Right.
is just so taxing on them, especially at this age, at this point in their careers.
For sure. For sure. And I think overall the 3-point shot is less important than, him being able to just take a dribble or two in and hit that floater. Like Dahan's been there, so he's been kind of working with them on their finishing and stuff like that. But I do think if he can just kind of hit that little mini push shot, because a lot of times teams will kind of sag off for him and give him the three, but they'll also kind of give him like a few dribbles of space as well. So if he can hit that, that would be huge. And it'll kind of almost open up a path for him and Chris Paul to run a lot more pick and roll. And him being like more of a, not necessarily a finisher every time, but just having that option to hit that floater or and also pass as well, which would just make their offense even more difficult to stop. Um, so we're getting close to the end here, but I kind of wanted to pivot to something that I was interested in earlier today when I was talking about just who are your way too early contenders in the NBA, right? Like just based on what we've seen so far in free agency, what we already know about these teams, a lot of the core of these teams are already intact. So you can kind of deduce who's going to be in the mix already. Obviously, Phoenix has kind of put themselves kind of in the mix with the acquisition of Bradley Beal, but I'm just not too high on their championship ceiling this year, just because I feel like it's just a lot of brand new pieces there, and it's just hard to get to a championship level that fast. Um, but who would you say are like your, you know, these teams are probably going to be in the mix when it's all said and done? In July right now.
Yeah, so I think to me, the West has been a little more top heavy than we're used to. I think still pretty starkly, I don't think a whole lot is going to have changed from last year in the West. I think, we know what the Nuggets are. Yes, they lost Bruce Brown, but they're in a really good position to replace him, or at least replace the production in the aggregate. So they're going to be the top tier contender. We know they can do it. Um, I also think that the Lakers are going to be up there. Unfortunately, you
I
still have
agree.
LeBron and AD. AD is probably, when he's out there, he's playing better than we've ever seen him play, and that's really saying something considering what kind of a monster he was in New Orleans,
Hmm.
and how
Yeah.
good he was in that 2020 season. So when you still have that, when you still have LeBron, you're going to be in the mix. I think they upgraded their supporting cast. They did a good job keeping Reeves. They managed to get Gabe Vincent in the fold, which I think was a really good deal for them. They were able to keep some other guys on the perimeter. I'm not so sure how the Rui fit is going to go, but that's a guy you kind of have to keep if you're going to trade for him. So they made all the right moves. Um, they kind of strike me as maybe the top contenders in the West, and I think Golden State and Phoenix kind of fall in right behind there, where we know that they have the stars that can take you to a championship. It's just a lot behind them that kind of has to fall into place, or maybe kind of break their way. Um, because I see teams like Denver and LA, they have the supporting cast you need. It's just a question of, can you keep the stars healthy, get the right matchups, put
Hmm.
yourself in that position. And then I don't know, man. Like Memphis, I just don't know what to make of them anymore. Like getting Marcus Smart is huge. Like don't get me wrong, but now you got Ja missing a third of the season. You know, who knows what that's going to be looking like trying to get him back. And I don't know, man. Like they just kind of feel like a team that's headed for a culture shift, and whether that's trading Ja away, you know, just kind of like wiping themselves clean of this situation, or maybe like bringing in some new voices to the locker room, like a Marcus Smart. Uh, like they just feel like I don't know, like kind of like a powder keg. You know, like they could win 57 games and be two seed again, or they could win like 48 and then get like bounced in the first round, and then everyone's up for trade discussion. Um,
Yeah.
but it's going to be interesting out there. And then I mean, beast of the East, man. Like the Celtics are going to be crazy as usual. The
Mhm.
Bucks managed to keep everybody, which is crazy. I didn't think they'd be able to get Middleton and Lopez back. So like they've got their championship core still together. Um, if Miami pulls off this Damian Lillard trade, like they're gonna be right back in it, man. Like it's hard
Yeah.
to have a better trio than Dame, Jimmy, and
Bam.
Bam. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy.
For
Um,
sure.
whew, I don't know. We'll see. The Sixers may or may not fall apart. Like I think Uh, I think that's kind of the exciting thing right now, man. It's like last playoffs, there were so many points where it just felt like anything could happen,
Hmm.
and I feel like we're really headed for that this year. You know, like the Nuggets have earned the right to say like, "Hey, you got to show us that you're going to beat us." Like, no team has clearly, I think, put themselves ahead of them, at least in terms of like maybe kind of the mental edge, like on paper edge, whatever you want to call it. Um, it's going to be another bloodbath, and I'm so excited for it.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I have the same teams. I would probably elevate Golden State there. I would say it's Denver, LA. I mean, until they're knocked off, I would say Denver is just up there. And then I would put under
Yeah,
them the Lakers and the Warriors. I think they're pretty close. And then after that, I just don't see it with any other team in the West, to be honest. I think obviously the Phoenix Suns have a ton of talent, but it's just a lot of redundant talent. And then
right.
it's just like literally all minimum guys from there. Like so, and then it's like I just said, these kind of composite one summer everybody joins in one summer type of teams usually have a difficult time navigating the extremely difficult points of the season and playoff series and stuff like that because they don't have that experience with each other to fall back on and get through those moments. So I'm not really high on their ceiling as of yet. Maybe in like a year or two, I will be. Memphis, like you said, they're kind of boom or busts. They could be really good or they can be just kind of mid. I'm kind of leaning towards mid, but we'll see. um, and then in the East, like you said, the Bucks. Whenever you have a top three player in your team, you're always going to be in the mix as long as they have some type of competent level support around them. Celtics are going to be amazing again for sure. Dame going to Miami would be super interesting because Miami, for some reason, like whether I mean they're going to be obviously much better in the regular season if they get him, but despite not being like juggernauts in the regular season, they always seem to have Boston and Milwaukee's number in some capacity, right? Like I want to say over the last few years, they're like 4-2 in the playoffs against both of those teams. So
hmm
even with Dame in the mix, that's just more scoring, and oftentimes it felt like Miami didn't have enough scoring over the years, even though they had a really good run this past year. But he kind of fortifies their offense. Like he's legitimately a top 10, maybe higher offensive player in the league at this point. So pairing him with two dirty work guys, do it all dirty work guys like Jimmy and Bam would be scary, I think, for the Eastern Conference. So I would definitely have those same teams right there. Um, it's been fun. It's been a fun one. We covered a lot. sorry for all the Golden Spaces listeners. We know it's been a while. Promise to, put out a little bit more content more consistently going forward from here. But honored to have Charlie back on. He's always welcomed as a guest. Incredible basketball mind. Follow him on Twitter if you aren't. Listen to his pod as well. Read his stuff, all that. You want to plug anything else, Charlie, that you're working on?
Nah, you got it all. Writing at the Swish Theory, podding at Game 6 Clay. Should have something out this week on our guy, Jonathan Kuminga. Getting all my off-season stories that I want to write lined up. So, yeah,
Nice.
fun things cooking, man. Getting ready for a new season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're expecting that leap from JK on this side.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So we're excited. We are excited. Thank you guys for joining us. Like I said, we'll be more consistent with our content. We got some stuff cooking up for you guys. So looking forward to it. See you guys later. Peace.